Today we have with us Monique Hammond, who's going to be speaking with us on hearing loss. Monique Hammond is a registered pharmacist who lost hearing in her left ear at a church fundraiser over 10 years ago from a loud folk rock band performance. The incident became a life changer. She had to quit her job at the University of Minnesota Hospital Pharmacy. She had graduated with high distinction from the University of Minnesota College of Pharmacy. After losing hearing, she did 5 years of research and wrote the book, What Did You Say? An Unexpected Journey into the World of Hearing Loss. And by the way, we can provide you links on where to get that book. Monique was appointed by the governor of Minnesota to the Commission of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing Minnesotans, where she completed 2 terms as vice chair. She's also past president of the Minnesota chapter of the Hearing Loss Association of America. Monique speaks regularly to employees and members of the public about hearing loss and the dangers of loud noise. Monique is a former Rotarian and has spoken in person and via Zoom to over 200 Rotary clubs across the US, Canada, and other countries. And just last year, I'm hearing from Ross, she spoke to 66 Rotary clubs. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Monique, and we're looking forward to hearing your talk, Monique. The screen is yours.
Well, good afternoon. I thank you so very much for having me today in this new year. And so first of all, happy new year and health and safety and everything that you could possibly imagine to everyone across the border. And so also I would like to thank you, like I said, for your invitation to Zoom with you today on a topic that became so fast, so dear to my heart. And so, yes, that topic is hearing loss. And so we'll be talking today particularly about hearing loss that we acquire, not necessarily the hearing loss that we might be born with. That's a totally different topic. And so we'll talk about hearing loss today in the sense of it being a silent epidemic, because the numbers are up and up there in every single age sector. And so it is already recognized by the World Health Organization as a fastly developing serious public health issue. And so as I found out, there is a lot more to hearing loss than not hearing so well. And so hearing loss does change lives, and not necessarily always for the better. And so as you were just told by a professional, I'm a hospital pharmacist. And so one day I went suddenly deaf in my left ear in a matter of 4 hours. And so it can happen very fast if the conditions are correct and right. And so that kind of defies already this misbelief that we always have. Oh, this happens conveniently over a lifetime. And when I am younger, I don't have to mind this at all, because that's mostly for old folks. Well, that is no longer true. And so a very loud sound exposure that I had the day before, actually, at a church fundraiser greatly contributed to my issues, according to my physicians, because they said that no matter what I might have had already in that ear, maybe a virus, what do we know? Maybe some kind of a pre-existing condition. They said that that loud noise insult really put me over the top, because it overloaded and caved the whole system. And so I knew that my job was on the line, because in my profession, I have to hear actually accurately. And any doubts and guesses and misunderstandings can seriously hurt people. And so all of a sudden, one finds out that one is no longer safe for the public, for the patients, and then also not for myself. And then I found out, as everything was going on and I desperately needed a plan B for my life, I found out that I had a lot to learn, because like most people, when all of a sudden the hearing doesn't cooperate anymore, I also found out that I didn't know very much about this condition and how it would affect my life. But as I learned, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. And so I like to say that education in so many ways really set me free. And so for you, my message is one of education, yes, of prevention, of course, but also one of serious empowerment for ourselves, for the people in our community, and also for our children, our grandchildren, the younger people in our demographics. And so gradually I got that new mission for my life. And that is to keep people of all ages hearing better and longer. And this is the mission then that gets me into the communities where I love to do education, but also into the industry where I just absolutely delight in giving presentations to people who are every day at risk with their hearing due to loud sound, and to educate them and how to prevent that and all of those things. So why do we say that hearing loss is a silent epidemic? Mostly it is because hearing loss is the result of silent and invisible injury throughout the hearing system, and that can lead then also to a silent and an invisible disability, and that's oftentimes what hearing loss is called, the silent disability. By now it affects all ages, as I mentioned. It is no longer for old folks anymore, just limited to them, because Johns Hopkins research tells us that by now 1 in 5 Americans age 12 and over, think about that, age 12 and over, has hearing loss enough to affect daily communication. And so these statistics are basically the same. It is roughly 20% of our population that has, and the numbers are growing, that has a problem with this. And so what Johns Hopkins tells us right there is that hearing loss is first and foremost a communication issue. And we know that age 12, those are children. They are children that are going to school. School-aged kids are already dealing with this, because what people with hearing loss mostly struggle with is the understanding of speech in the least amount of background sound. And so now think about the 12-year-old who sits already in a loud schoolroom and already struggles to understand the detail of what is being taught to him or her. And how does that affect the education? How does that affect the future? And so as parents and as grandparents, we have to really kind of tie into this and become aware of this issue, because this is going to be a problem for people. And the younger we can catch people and we can educate them, the better it is. So hearing loss is a communication issue. And it has an effect on quality of life almost immediately at any age, and I can testify to that. Because it is a communication issue, it affects people socially and emotionally. And so they are coming to our, kind of meetings here in Minneapolis, and they are telling us that as this is going on, they are really kind of feeling always on the outsides of conversations and of activities that they might have with some of their loved ones, yes, but also with their people at work. It affects every single aspect of our lives. And so people get depressed over that, and hearing loss is known to be notorious for causing that depression. And then people also isolate themselves more and more. They don't feel like going to that family picnic anymore where they cannot understand a word in the huddle. And so anyway, so as we also have then now the COVID situation still going on, and we all have gotten a little bit of a taste of what isolation can actually do to people and how toxic that is actually to the psyche. Maybe this is a good time to become a little bit more empathetic for those people that we have already in our families who have hearing loss. And so that isolation then is in the COVID age now also kind of complicated by the fact that we are wearing masks. And masks are very important because we have to get after this at some point in time. But for people with hearing loss, of course, all of a sudden, we can no longer read lips, as we say, or read speech. That's actually what it is technically called, because the face is obstructed. We cannot see the lips anymore, but there are masks out there that have the clear panel, that can be, it can be small or it can be larger. Here is one example. It is a mask that is actually here in the States FDA approved, and it lets the lips be seen. And so it gives us a fighting chance at communicating with people. And so I always tell people with hearing loss, get some of these masks. This one here has particularly been, kind of in the healthcare system. It has been popular with dentists and radiologists because remember, they are talking to us. They have to be masked at any time, and we cannot even tell whether somebody is addressing us. So this is just a show and tell. No, I am not being paid by anyone to tell you this. I just pay forward what I have learned and little tips that I can give people in order to be able to function. Of course, I also found out that hearing loss affected me seriously, professionally, and financially. I took major hits on both sides, and I do not wish that on anyone. It is quite a struggle, to tell you, day after day. But now the hearing loss researchers at Johns Hopkins are also making the other quality of life connection, and that is that hearing loss has ties to dementia, and who wants to go there? And so these are reminders of why we should be protecting the hearing that we have right now today. We should be protecting that hearing and keeping it so that we can still hear tomorrow. And then also we should be energized to prevent hearing loss for ourselves and also for others wherever we can. Because there are many reasons why people have hearing loss, and they run the gamut from earwax plugs all the way to brain tumors. And so for this slide, I try to organize things a little bit alphabetically. And when I do that, then of course, aging, of course, comes out on top. And to tell the truth, aging is still worldwide the leading cause of hearing loss. Simply because the baby boomers are still aging, and also people are living so much longer. The second leading cause worldwide of hearing loss, and that's the one that I am focusing on, because you can imagine that with my history, that is only natural, right? And that is the excess noise in our world. The world is getting louder by the day, and we are becoming increasingly reckless with our sound exposures. However, excess noise leads to something that is called noise-induced hearing loss. This is the same type of damage, the same sort of ilk as hearing loss of aging, except for it is an accelerated and a premature aging of the ears. Think about that. And so an audiologist told me one time, yes, I'm working with students, people that are young in their profession, 20, 25 years of age, and their ears are already at an age of a 45 to a 50-year-old because of all of the damage that they have already caused to themselves. And of all of the reasons for hearing loss, when I'm looking at all of this, there is not so much that I can do. Maybe I can work with an earwax plug or maybe with an infection, but otherwise there is not so much that I can affect immediately and right now. However, I can affect how much power I give to the sound in my life, how much I let it invade my life. And so this is entirely preventable. Noise-induced hearing loss, the doctor told me, is preventable. It doesn't have to be that way, and it becomes every day more and more a matter of choice. Because what do we plan to do about it? You know, what power do we have over the sound volume? Oh, well, we do not have to go necessarily to the loud, places where we are killing off our ears, oftentimes voluntarily. Remember, life is choices. So, the sports bars that are opening up again, insanely loud, we do not speak up in our churches and tell them to turn it down because they have become over the top loud. There are all of those places, the concerts. So what can we do? If we do go there, maybe we can choose to stay away from the sound source. We can also choose to protect ourselves. But it is amazing. People never even look at the back of the package of the earplugs in order to learn what the manufacturer says and how they should be installed correctly. So we can protect ourselves. We can get away from it. We can make all sorts of choices. We also have to choose to learn and to teach our children and our grandchildren for their protection. And so I have to say that when we're talking about these things, that's all nice and fine. We love to chat about things, but that is basically one of those things that ends up being a blah, blah, blah. Yes, let her talk. And then it is another presentation, and then we go home, and that is like that everywhere you go. I like to tell people what actually is happening here. And so you're looking now at the diagram of a picture that I actually made for that book that was mentioned before about the ear, to have it really very simple and laid out very straight so people can follow. And so we were going to be looking at what areas actually are affected. And when it comes to noise-induced hearing loss and hearing loss of aging being of the same kind, the same areas of the ear are affected. And that is particularly the middle ear, the inner ear, which is the largest structure on this diagram, and then also the nerve, the hearing nerve, that is basically like an electrical cord that ties the whole thing to the brain. Now, we are not going to be talking about these loop-de-loops up on top here because they are for balance and equilibrium, which is another job for the inner ear. We're going to be concentrating for a short time here on the lower structure, and that is the snail-shaped organ right here. Because that snail-shaped organ in real life is called the cochlea. And cochlea in Latin simply means snail, because that's what it looks like. Now that cochlea in real life is about the size of a pea, like in peas and carrots. Everything is very small here and not built for the amount of abuse that we submit it to. And so we have two of those cochleas, one for each ear, right? And in each cochlea, we have some 20,000 or so very finely tuned and rather fragile hearing cells that run along that coil. That's all we get for a lifetime. 20,000 or so cells per ear from the time that we are born to the time that maybe we die at 105. That's actually not that many cells. But when those cells become endangered, they become hurt, they become unresponsive, and they become maybe going down the dying path, then that is the way these cells remain in us humans, because in humans, in mammals, they do not rejuvenate themselves spontaneously the way they do in birds and fish. And so we have research going on, and a researcher told me, oh yes, I can grow these hearing cells actually in the laboratory. He said, but there are some glitches and hiccups because I have to make them work the way their forefathers did. You know, tie them to all of those frequencies and pitches that the human ear can perceive. And so it's going to be a while for that research to give us, the general public, all of these benefits that we expect. But it is these cells that are going to be changing the sound that is traveling their way or has traveled their way through the air and through the ear. And finally, those sound waves have, you know, reached the cochlea. Those cells are now going to be translating that sound energy into electrical signals. And going from one type of energy to a different type of energy is really difficult for Mother Nature to do, but that's where we are starting to affect the system. And so these signals are traveling then from the cochlea to the brain, the hearing portion of the brain, by means of the hearing nerve or the electrical cord. And it is in the brain that these signals are being interpreted. They are being decoded, if you will. And so in so many ways, we hear with our brain. And so people come up to me and they say, well, I can understand that as I am aging and everything else seems to be sagging out on me. I can understand that these cells are also going to be taking a hit. But how come that sound is so toxic? And for that, we have to remember that a sound wave is a pressure wave. And it is that sound pressure that is giving sound its oomph, its volume, if you will. And it is that sound pressure that becomes so toxic. And so as it gets loud out there, the sound waves pack that pressure punch. They come tearing through the air, tear through the ear, get to the cochlea, and with every single repeated and prolonged exposure to excessively loud sound, those little hearing cells are beaten down over and over until they bend and they snap, and many of them might not come back to their previous level of functioning. And so then one day we wake up and we might be having hearing loss symptoms, like everybody is mumbling. We cannot understand speech in background sound. The ears are feeling stuffed and full and we cannot pop them. And that's what people with hearing loss often do. I do it all the time. You know this, the guppy moves, trying to unplug those ears that are feeling permanently stuffed up. And so we have gone from healthy hearing cells, bam, 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 down until maybe we get to a severe situation like what I have in my ear. There is not much standing here anymore in order to respond to the various inputs and the various stimuli. And so as we are going down, we also accumulate more and more symptoms. And people with hearing damage and hearing loss also report having tinnitus or tinnitus, the infamous buzzing and ringing in the ears, you know. And so whatever we do, whenever we have those symptoms, these hearing noises, we should be finding out what might be causing them. There are different reasons for it. There are different types of tinnitus, but in over 90% of the cases, it is already due directly to hearing, to damage and already hearing loss. And so when we're coming out of the overly loud venue, no matter where that might be, at work, off the job, on the job, Mother Nature doesn't care, and we have buzzing and ringing in the ears together with feelings of dullness and fullness, then we got that shot across the bow by Mother Nature, and it is time to heed the message. Because if we do not, then with every single exposure, this is going to be getting worse. It's going to become longer and stronger, and before you know it, all of a sudden you join my 24/7 tinnitus club. And tinnitus is one of those things that oftentimes bothers people much more than the hearing loss that is actually causing it. Because what we are listening to is not coming from the ear. That's what it feels like, but it comes already from the brain. That's where the sound is generated. And so we have already kicked up that damage a notch or two, bam, bam. And so Mother Nature is talking to us, and we have to heed that message. Because not only do we damage the cells, of course, we also doing damage to the hearing nerve, because those cell pressure, those sound pressure waves, I should say, are carrying through, and they now attack the rather weak connection between the hearing cell and the hearing nerve. And so there is erosion of that connection, and pretty soon actually those connections let loose. And so bing, 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 we are also disconnecting the cells from the nerve. And I tell you one thing, that is really not a good thing, because now we have nerve damage, we have cell damage. And so this explains a little bit, at least, why the signals that are traveling from the cochlea to the brain, why they might be weak, why they might be wishy-washy, and why speech turns every day more and more into gibberish. And so noise-induced hearing loss is permanent. Remember, we are doing research. It's cumulative. We are piling on the damage every day if we do not do anything about it, but it is preventable. And this is why it is important to learn about this, because it doesn't have to be this way. And so we have to learn that that extremely loud sounds, prolonged and repeated loud sound, is by no means entertaining, useful, fun, or even macho. What are we thinking of? The only thing that we are doing to ourselves is that we are prematurely damaging our good hearing. And with that, we are robbing ourselves. Remember, life is choices. We're robbing ourselves of also prematurely of our good quality of life. And so as I'm saying all of this, there is another toxic falsehood and a myth that has to die. And that is that human ears are ever getting used to excessively loud sound. And so I hear that all the time. Oh, I have worked here for so long. My ears are totally insensitive to this noise. They are tolerant to it. They are immune to it. I have gotten used to it. No, no, no. There is no such thing. The only thing that the unprotected, overloaded, and overtaxed human ear becomes to excessively loud sound is the deafer to it. Deafer and deafer and deafer, until all of a sudden, nothing much bothers us anymore, but life is also all of a sudden not so much fun anymore. And so people say, well, I would like to protect myself, but how do I know how loud it is? There is one good rule. If you do have nothing to measure anything, if you have to scream over noise, you are in a bad place. It is industrial strength noise. You have to get out of there. You have to protect yourself. You have to do something. And here I might be thinking about these situations again, like at the holiday parties that we used to have, where it was so loud and people have a drink and they get louder and louder, and pretty soon you're standing at 3 to 5 feet from somebody and you have to scream to get heard over the noise. But I didn't say understood, just to be perceived. That's toxic. Then we have, of course, nowadays we have smartphones, and there we have sound meter apps that are telling us how loud it is and whether we are getting into danger. But those apps have to be compatible with the phone that we have. And so an iPhone needs to have an i-compatible app. A Droid needs to have a Droid-compatible app, or else we, of course, get incorrect readings. For the MP3 people, for the MP3 situation, there people are always wondering how loud it can be and all of that. Manufacturers never tell us how much these players are pumping out, and some of them are downright toxic. And so the 60-60 rule that I'll tell you about has come out of the surveys that actually hearing aid specialists and then also audiologists and sound specialists have done with some of these instruments. And so for the most part, they have found that at least the ones that they surveyed, at 60% of the volume dial, there was like a sweet spot, where the people heard still plenty, believe me, but at least they were not immediately in danger. And so it has become accepted practice that 60% on the volume dial is about where those things should be set. Then we also have to start limiting our exposure time, because remember, this is sound pressure and how loud it is, and also how long we are exposed. And so the second 60 is that we are listening for maybe an hour, 60 minutes at a time, and then we take out those earbuds and we are giving the brain and the ears a well-deserved rest. And so the 60-60 rule. Now, if you go to concerts, and many people do, they like to go to live concerts, then do investigate musicians' earplugs, also called high fidelity earplugs, because they are different. They lower the sound in general terms. They do not clip frequencies. You can have them specially made for yourself by an audiologist. They are going to be taking ear imprints and all of that. You can also go online and you can Google those things, because we have to protect ourselves. We want to hear all the music, all of the sound, but at a lower level. Because remember, Mother Nature does not care what kind of music we listen to. Mother Nature doesn't care whether it is Mozart or whether it is Meatloaf and Twisted Sister. Mother Nature cares how loud it is and how long it lasts. And so, hearing is a precious sense, and this is why I'm coming to Rotary to have you help me spread the word on the silent epidemic in your communities and in your families. And so learn about this and pay forward what you learned, even what you learned here today. Or you can pay forward my name. I'm out there, I'm talking to people everywhere. And so, you can connect me with a different Rotary or with a different, social group or any of that. Maybe there is even a manufacturer or somebody in your area who'd like to have a little bit more education for their employees, who knows? But anyway, usually, however, when we try to make changes like this that are relatively big changes in our behavior and also having that center into our consciousness, then we also have to look at whether we might be contributing to the silent epidemic. Like for the last holidays, did we bring home again the insanely loud, game consoles and toys for the children, or did we go for the small but very potent amplifier for the home stereo system, where we are cranking it up to the last notch so that the walls are shaking and we are feeling the movie? How loud do we actually schedule our Rotary events? Those are the types of things that we have to start thinking about, because Rotarians are doing that also well. They are getting that introspection going and they are taking it to their community, actually. And so why would they be doing that? Simply because this all comes under the mantra of service above self. Because all we try to do here is to keep people of all ages hearing better and longer. And so I consider any reduction in sound volume that we can have, or noise management as we call it, and any kind of a bit of teaching that we can do, I can call that investments in quality of life for now and for the future, so that indeed we will be hearing so much longer and so much better, and so that the day will never ever come for any one of us when the music just simply dies. And so if you have any questions for me, because this is what I have for you, if you have any questions for me, then I would be happy to entertain them. I also give you my email address, and where you can send me an email in case you all of a sudden wake up in the middle of the night and you have this big question that you forgot to ask. or you can also go to my website, and this is where I endeavor to put blogs up, and I'm gonna put one up this afternoon on some new research that is being done. And so anyway, so that we learn together and we keep on track. And so anyway, if anybody has a question.
Yes, yes, thank you so much, Monique. We do have questions. If you did want to stop the share screen.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a question here from Sam Watts. Let me just put it in front. Is aging a major factor of, quote, more or less normal, end quote, hearing loss? Is it fairly normal that as we move into our 80s and 90s that we lose a fair amount of our ability to hear?
Yes, it actually is, you know, because like I was saying, it's wear and tear on the body. And so for many people, it is exposure to sounds. Like for instance, we also have loud noise in our own homes. Like for instance, when I dry my hair, that hair dryer, when I have it on the quick or the fast thing, is like 90 decibels. And around the head, you know, so we are, and noise exposure are cumulative. The vacuum cleaner is around 90. You know, the leaf blowers are actually worse than even the lawnmower. So we are working every day, not thinking about it because it is normal life, but we are exposing ourselves to these things. A crying baby is 100 decibels. In the industry, it is the cutoff is 85 decibels. That's when, in general terms and as an average sound level, they have you protect your ears. Here it is OSHA, you know, where you are getting literally industrial regulations into place. And so, yes, we do age, we have that. There are also certain genetic tendencies that we might have, where people might have acquire hearing loss at a younger age. We also have ear infections. All sorts of things contribute to this. But for the most part, you know, our hearing that is affected is that hearing of the inner ear, although there are also other types of hearing loss. And this is why I say, when you feel that you do not understand people very well anymore, you have to turn up the TV. Some people say, I hear like I am submerged underwater. You know, that could also be coming from a different portion of the ear. What we should do is have our primary physician recommend that we go to an audiologist and have a professional hearing test done. That goes beyond listening to little beeps. You know, listening to beeps, oh yeah, you don't have hearing loss. There are other components to hearing loss. There are people that have the normal hearing test with the beeps, and yet they have hearing loss. They say it affects my life. And so get it diagnosed. Find out what it is all about and what kind of help one can get.
Thank you. Thank you, Monique. We do have another question from Heather. Do you have any advice for trying to teach teenagers who live with their AirPods in their ears?
Well, yes, I would suppose it's very difficult to do. And oftentimes we say that teenagers or children do not listen to us, but they do. If one makes a case with them, and you know, my daughter never really, I found, listened to me, but later on I would find, yes, she actually did, because she would be repeating things that she had heard from us. And another thing is that parents have to also start being better, demonstrating better hearing health and hearing hygiene, as I say. If we go into the garage and working with power tools, by the way, I mean, you work at power tools, I think it should be mandatory that we are putting the earplugs in, because every one of them is very loud. So anyway, so if Dad goes out there and mows the lawns or plows the snow and has hearing protection on and says, this is why I'm doing this, because I don't want to damage my ear. You know, I want to keep hearing you for as long as I possibly can. They have to learn that they make those choices. And there is nobody who regrets it more than younger people when they are already struggling, because social events and social connections are even more important to them than they are to us, you know, at a certain age. And so it is making the case and actually showing them this picture that I showed you. This is what you're doing. It might not be today or tomorrow, but you're accumulating this every single day, and you have to put an end. You can listen, but you have to listen at a regular volume, and you also have to take breaks, because the ears and the mind need breaks just like every single other portion of the body.
Thank you, Monique. We do have another question from Glenn. He'd like to know what rough percentage of people over 60 or 65 have need of hearing aids. In other words, what's the probability that we will at some point in life experience a hearing deficit that requires help? Lots of us have glasses, many fewer have hearing aids.
Yes. Well, the problem with when you're getting to the age of 60, 65, they say roughly about a third of the people have hearing loss. And hearing loss that is affecting their lives, it might be not immediately a very serious or a profound hearing loss, but they do have hearing loss maybe in the mild to moderate loss, and that is already enough to really dampen sound around us, where we are all of a sudden starting to turn it up. But it goes up with the age. They are saying at the 75 to 80, you can say 75 to 80% of people have this problem. And so when it gets to be into the 60s, it's roughly about a third, or they're 33%, which is over 30% of the population that have this. The thing with the hearing aids is that many people who have a milder loss might not even immediately need hearing aids, but they might need an assistive device. But what is that? And so it is still a good idea when one is getting tested for the hearing, and even if it is like, you might not need a hearing aid, what can help me? And to engage that hearing instrument dispenser or audiologist on giving us also insights into assistive listening systems. You know, that might be just something that turns it up a little louder or whatever. But hearing aids, of course, there is here in the United States, I don't know how you're doing in Canada there, but hearing aids in the United States have this terrible reputation because they are so expensive. You know, and so people don't do it because of that. It's also because there is bias and stigma attached to hearing aids, and much more than it is to glasses. But I remember when I was young, glasses had a terrible stigma, especially at a young age, you know, and so we have learned how to live with that. It's also society catching up. But hearing aids right now, nowadays, are almost invisible. You know, they come in different colors that blend in with the hair and stuff. And so the price, they say, is not so much anymore a thing. The bias, the stigma, it is how we want to help ourselves and what kind of a quality of life that we want to have. So again, it comes down to choices and decisions that we make. But I feel that we are cheating ourselves out of quality of life if we do not take care of hearing loss and of hearing issues the way we take care of anything else, of our teeth, of our eyes, of our hearts, and whatever.
Thank you. And I think this may be the last question, Monique. Are there any treatments for tinnitus?
Right now, tinnitus is still something that cannot be cured. You know, so once we have the tinnitus, that's why I say don't let it get worse. Don't let the hearing get worse, because that might be it. Meanwhile, though, there are other reasons for tinnitus. Like, for instance, there are different types. Like I said, people who have, you know, like head and neck injuries or head and neck problems, cervical disc problems, people who have TMJ, or, you know, who chew their teeth, as I say, you know, all of a sudden might be getting tinnitus. And once you take care of that, then it should be getting better and have it diagnosed. Also, certain medications, you might be asking your doctor, your pharmacist, if a medication might be giving you some of these feelings. Like people who are taking a lot of arthritis medications sometimes can come down with tinnitus. And so those are components that, but they're in general principles. There is not a cure. There is research going on, but what we say is that there are ways of managing tinnitus. And so anything that kind of distracts the brain a little bit from it. For people with tinnitus, it's not really good to be always in a totally quiet environment, but that doesn't mean in a loud environment. People benefit at night from having a fan running so that the brain gets distracted, because if we don't hear something else, then the tinnitus is all we hear. That's all we can focus on and concentrate on. And the more and the bigger it gets. So it is a way of managing it, of calming down that phantom of the ear. putting it back in its box. And so I oftentimes listen. I always have my noise reducing headphones ready, and I always listen to soft music or nature tunes. I never thought I was going to be listening to the land of the loon, you know, the nature tunes, the water trickling down. And in order to kind of mask and distract the brain, and actually I have a couple of those things where I fall asleep if I'm not being careful, because it relaxes me. So anyway, so anything we can down to quiet down. Quit the excess coffee and soda, you know, where we have so much sugar and we have caffeine. Anything that revs up the brain kind of can also rev up the tinnitus. And most of all, give those ears a break and quit the excess sound exposures.
I have a question, David.
Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
What effect does loss of hearing in one ear have upon the good ear? In other words, you lose hearing from 90% down to 30% in your left ear, but your other ear is 90%. Is it overtaxed?
I have exactly that issue. And so I'm virtually pretty much deaf in this one. Hearing aids have never helped me that much, but there are other things that are coming along with having lopsided hearing, as I call it. There's a tremendous difference between this and this. And so, yes, I overtaxed my ear, and this one here, of course, I'm aging as I'm sitting in front of you here, right? So that is not helping me, but all of my telephone conversations, everything that I do is always on that right ear. And so it is going down. I have lost, but not enough yet to be really into a complicated hearing aid. But so we hear in stereo, you know, between the right ear and the left ear, it gets integrated in the brain and we hear in stereo. So when you're disrupting one ear, you're basically disrupting the stereo sound. And so that is why they say, try to give the weaker ear some help. Try to get some sound in there so that the brain feels that feedback a little bit. When I have my noise reducing headphones on and the background noise is being dulled, you know, because they are noise reducing, they don't make you deaf. But when that is all done, then all of a sudden, it seems to me like it comes back together again. And I sit here and I listen to the computer or something, and I feel almost a little bit normal again, as I say, because there are ways of kind of fooling the brain, and audiologists can help us with that, of getting this integrated. That said, if you have this big, huge discrepancy, that also interferes with the balance system. And so it's also good to get some feedback, some noise, some sound back into the deafer ear in order to have the brain get back into balance again. People with a milder hearing loss have three times the chance of having falls and trips and all of that because of their balance and their equilibrium being off. And that's becoming a huge problem in the industry, where there are so many trip hazards and all of that. So it's important to get as much going so that we get that feeling, that integrating feeling in the brain back, so that we get at least the impression that we are hearing better, and actually we do, because it also relaxes us. We are not getting so much of a listening effort, tiredness, because I tell you one thing that I found out, hearing loss is tiring. I had no idea what that struggle means. And so people with hearing loss, oftentimes they do tire. And in very intensive conversations and stuff like that, yeah, after a while one has to literally tune out because it is sensory overload.
Thank you. Unless there are any other questions? No? Monique, thank you so much for your passionate and informative presentation, and for encouraging awareness of noise management and how we can take care of ourselves and our hearing. You'll find that Monique's email address is in the chat box, and also a link to her blog, to her website. And we can turn off the recording now, I think, Heather.